Hi guys, time for another video for our Portal project. In this one, I'm going to show you how to start using Git for version control. Really what we want to do is as we change our software, we want to make sure that every time that we get a working version that works well for us, we want to take a snapshot of that so that we can make changes in case we really screw things up. We can just kind of go back to the last known good state sort of thing. So we're going to use Git for that, and Git essentially is a tool at its very core is a tool that just takes snapshots of your files and directories. So that's kind of its basic function, and that's kind of where most of the value comes from. So we're going to take a snapshot of our current version, but before we can do that, we have to initialize. So whenever you start a new project, you got to initialize. So at my command prompt here, I'm just going to run the command git and init. And that is very fast because it doesn't really do much, right? All that does is creates this directory, a .git subdirectory. So we want to make sure we run this in the root directory of our project. Our whole project only needs one .git directory. It doesn't need one in every subdirectory. So we've done that, and we can look at that directory just briefly. I can say ls-git. So Git inside that directory has a whole bunch of different files to keep track of snapshots. Like that's its inner kind of working database. And actually, it's a pretty fascinating topic how Git stores all the information, how it does it. It's a really clever system. We're not going to get into that just yet because let's just get to using it first, and maybe one day I'll do a little advanced video on Git. Okay, so we've initialized our directory. Now we can run a command called git status. So git status shows us a few things. It says what branch we're on. We don't have to get into branches yet, but this is when you've got like a long running bit of code, like a long running set of changes that you want to kind of maintain in parallel. You can create a separate branch, but that's way beyond what we need to do yet. There are no commits yet. We haven't committed anything. A commit is just another, it just gets terminology for a snapshot. Okay, so we haven't created any commits yet. And then it tells us untracked files. So it lists all the files and directories that it doesn't know about yet. So in order to create a snapshot, we got to tell Git what files we're interested in snapshotting and what ones we don't care about. Okay, so it won't, in any kind of software project, there's often files that you don't care about. And right away, we can see a new file here that we didn't see before called .cp cache. Okay. Interesting note here. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you, at least in Bash, so on a kind of a Unix style shell that we would get in Mac OS and Windows, if you're using Git for Windows and the Git Bash utility, the dot at the start of the file name indicates that that's a hidden file or hidden directory. So if I just say ls, I see deps.eden and I see source, but I don't see .cp cache because ls kind of hides that from me. But Git knows it's there. So Git shows it and says, hey, you got this dot directory here that I don't know about. Maybe you want to start dealing with that. So with ls, just in case you're curious, ls-a stands for all, and that includes our dot files. So we've got dot and dot dot. This is an alias for the current directory. This is an alias for the parent directory. And we've got two hidden files here. One is called .cp cache. One is called .git. And then the deps.eden file that we know about and the source directory that we know about. Okay. So we have to tell Git, and Git helpfully tells us here, hey, you got to call git add to track documents or to track files in Git. So we will add things that we need. So we can say git add deps.eden, and we want to add source as well. So we'll do that. And then we'll say git status again and find out where we're at. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So Git has, once we add files to Git, once we tell Git that it needs to care about these files, it says, okay, you want to commit these files. You want to commit deps.eden, and notice we specified source here, but when we said source, it really did a recursive search down through all the directories and found all the files and added them to Git source control. So we didn't add CP cache. We don't want to do that. CP cache is a cache directory created by the CLJ utility, and that's where, when we specify libraries in our depths Eden file, this is where they get cached. So we really don't want those because you can always recreate them. CLJ can always download new dependencies, new versions of those dependencies, or new copies of the same version of those dependencies from the internet. So in general, you only check the files that you edit into Git. Anything that can be downloaded or regenerated, you generally don't check those into Git. Okay? So Git status, we're ready to commit this stuff. So what we can say is we can say git commit, and then we can say -m for message, and we can say initial commit. Okay, we enclose that in quotes because we've got a space here. So -m looks at the next thing. If we didn't enclose this in quotes, it would just think the comment was initial. So we have to put quotes around this part. But this basically, git commit creates a snapshot. Remember, commit is Git's terminology for snapshot. This creates a snapshot and it gives it a name. It gives a message that's attached to that snapshot. So this is just usually a short sentence or phrase that describes the thing that you changed. And this is helpful if you ever need to go back in your history and see what you've changed. You can give each snapshot a name. So this name, we're just going to call it our initial commit. And Git does that. And it shows a few things about that it's done. It's created a couple files, and it's put kind of a snapshot of our directory under this Git directory here. Okay. Now, if I run Git status one last time, okay. So now all it does is it complains about the untracked files. We can address that later, but I'm not going to worry about it. And it says nothing added to commit, but untracked files present. So that's fine. And we're good. So there we go. We've initialized Git, and we've created our first snapshot of our project. So in the next video, I will continue on with adding some functionality to our web server.